Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concerns with Mr. Ho began prior to his hearing, when I started reviewing his bio and reviewing things that he said and done and written over the years. One of the things that initially flagged my attention as I was preparing for his hearing was really a characterization that he had given himself, in which he had described himself as, quote, a wild-eyed sort of leftist who was accused sometimes of seeing racism everywhere I look. Wasn't sure what to make of that, but I figured I could get to know him a little bit more during his hearing. My attention while preparing for that hearing was also drawn to some things that he posted on social media, things that he posted in response to a series of tweets that I had about a year and a half ago posted as part of a thread talking about the difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic like ours. In response to that, he posted something interesting. It didn't bother me at all that he was taking a different position than I was. I like and respect that kind of open, honest debate. What troubled me was something he said in it, something he said about the Constitution that concerned me. Here's what he wrote in response to that. He says, quote, "The mask is off." And he followed that one up by saying translation, meaning translation of my tweets talking about the difference between a rank, unadorned democracy on the one hand and a constitutional republic like ours. He said, translation, if we can't maintain, speaking as if he were a Republican, speaking for and on behalf of Republican office holders, Republicans in the Senate, for example. Translation, if we can't maintain minoritarian rule despite the Electoral College, Senate malapportionment, extreme partisan gerrymandering, and strict conditions on voting, then we'll rely on a 6-3 SCOTUS to block an elected Democratic agenda. He's a little vitriolic, I get that, but more than anything, I was confused and very curious about what he meant by one phrase in particular. The phrase in question was Senate malapportionment. As I explained to him at the hearing, wasn't quite sure what he meant by that. It's not a term that I've heard a lot. I've never really stopped to consider what it could have meant, but I started wondering when I read that, is this someone who disagrees with a principle very deeply rooted in our Constitution? That is that every state, regardless of its size, regardless of its population, will receive 2 votes in the United States Senate. It's very important to our republic. The Constitutional Convention could never have succeeded. Our republic could never have sprouted, much less flourished into what it's become without that feature. And I suspected when you refer to Senate malapportionment, it sounded to me like he might be trashing that constitutional principle. Wanted to know if he was in fact doing that, and if he was, whether he cared to retract that, whether he realized that this is the one feature in the Constitution you can't change. Under Article 5 of the Constitution, which outlines the procedures required to amend the Constitution, it identifies one remaining feature of the Constitution that cannot be amended. That is the feature of equal suffrage, equal representation by the states in the Senate. You cannot take that away, not by amendment. You can't do it at all without the state's consent. And no state, of course, would ever consent to that, so it's off the table. Anyway, I was curious about what his position was. I suspected he might back down and say, yeah, I shouldn't use that term. Now, I didn't exactly react that way. I'll get back to that in a moment. When I asked him about it, he gave me a series of vague, broad answers. just saying, well, you know, I wasn't really sure what you were asking about. I wasn't sure what you, referring to me, meant by your tweet. And then he started talking about fears that he had at the time, concerns that he had about whether Republicans would accept the ultimate outcome of elections. Now, it still didn't strike me as an appropriate phrase for that. It didn't match up. And I asked him, is there something you meant specifically by Senate malapportionment? He wouldn't engage. He basically just restated his broader concern. Oh, I didn't like the fact that I believed that Republicans were going to challenge the results of elections. Gave him 2 or 3 opportunities with 2 or 3 separate lines of inquiry. What did you mean by Senate malapportionment? What does that mean? Instead of answering that question forthrightly, he apologized for, quote unquote, misinterpreting my tweet. I was kind of shocked by his lack of candor, because he was very clearly not engaging on this, as I was asking him to do. By the way, he owed me no apology for misinterpreting my tweet. It was nice that he did it, but it really wasn't my concern. Somebody can misinterpret my tweet. It doesn't bother me in the least. Somebody can even engage in fiery rhetoric, and I may well vote for that person when it comes time to confirm. But he never answered it. Now, I could have perhaps decided that this was just somebody who, in the heat of the moment, threw in a term that he didn't understand, that he didn't know. But I dug in a little bit more when I realized that he had utterly refused to engage at all in any effort to answer my question about what he meant by Senate malapportionment. And I discovered that terms like malapportionment, when referring to the United States Senate, were not new to him. He knew exactly what he was doing. For example, when he was speaking at a National Civic Leadership Training Summit in 2018, Mr. Ho claimed that the United States has, quote, obviously lots of practices that are anti-democratic, that entrench, in some ways, minority rule in this country. And I'm talking about things like, you know, the Senate, the Electoral College, and the maldistribution of political power that results from these institutions. Just the next year, the year following that, in some remarks he delivered to UCLA Law School, Mr. Ho lamented that, quote, by 2040, 70% of the country, if current population trends maintain, will reside in just 15 states. Put that another way, that means 30% of the country will have 70 seats in the Senate and outsized representation in the Electoral College, close quote. As if that weren't enough for him, enough of the condemning of the constitutional order put in place in our founding document, you know, the one that we've all sworn an oath to uphold and protect and defend. He then went on to say, quote, it's incumbent upon folks who care about voting rights to see these connections between restrictions on the ability to participate and other kinds of attacks on fair representation on voters of color. My point is this. We absolutely do have a lot of people with a lot of diverse backgrounds, politically, ideologically, and otherwise, come before this committee. I don't expect everyone I vote for to share my particular views politically. I don't expect everyone who comes before this committee to even advocate for the same jurisprudential approach that I think is ideal. But I don't think it's too much to ask that people that we've been asked to confirm to a lifetime appointment as an Article III judge should not be expressing open hostility and contempt for the Constitution, the source of the authority by which they're appointed, the source of the authority by which they will operate as Article III judges. This is open contempt, and hostility toward the Constitution. And it's not like it's just some obscure provision either. This was essential to the compromise of 1787, a compromise that apparently he's still not settled on. Now, I believe in redemption, very much so.
Good.
That's why I've voted for a lot of people who have said things that I consider suboptimal. This one is different. This guy refused even to answer my question. He was evasive to the point of being dishonest. I cannot and I will not vote for someone who at once expresses repeatedly contempt for the U.S. Constitution and then secondly, lies about it when brought before this committee under oath. I strongly oppose Mr. Ho's confirmation, and I encourage my colleagues to do so. Thank you.